What's up, Brad family? I took inspiration from 3 scary and iconic American urban legends to write 3 hopefully creepy creepypastas. So let's get to it. Number 3, Bloody Mary. It started with a hushed whisper, and within days, it was swirling around the entire school. Everyone was talking about it. I think even the teachers. Supposedly, a student at a nearby middle school was dared by a couple of high schoolers to play a game. They claim it was a harmless prank, just meant to scare her for their amusement. But seeing how the outcome led to a missing persons report, not too many people in town are believing their side of the story. Not many details were released to the newspaper by the sheriff. All we knew at first was that the high schoolers took her to a basement of one of their homes and locked her into a bathroom with a busted out light to play the game. Through their laughter, they said they heard her screams, and when they opened the door, the girl was gone. The only thing out of place was the shattered mirror laying on the floor. The night after it happened, I overheard some of the parents discussing the disappearance and how they thought the police were intentionally withholding information so as to not spark rumors or copycat incidents. My mom said something about vaguely remembering a creepy urban legend she had heard when she was our age. I couldn't hear all of what she said that night, but it didn't matter because by the next day, someone else had heard the complete legend and it was spreading like wildfire through the student body. According to the legend, there used to be a woman named Mary that lived near our town in the early 18th century. She was said to have been an outcast due to her odd behavior. Apparently, wherever she went, misfortune followed. The townspeople began to whisper of her being cursed by a witch. Some even believed she was a witch. Tensions rose and came to a boiling point one day when Mary's neighbor's house inexplicably burnt down. He was furious and claimed to have spotted Mary eyeing his house from her bedroom window the day prior. Spooked, he said he yelled at her to mind her own business and that was what set her off into a fit of rage. Rage that led to her burning down his house. Already distrusted, this was the final straw for the town. A heated mob marched to her house and demanded she come out to face penalty. In their eyes, she was already found guilty. Terrified, she refused. The mob hurled insults and crazy accusations of witchery. When they began throwing rocks into her window, she retreated to her bathroom and locked the door, keeping it dark and quiet so as to not be found. But it didn't take long for them to break in and discover her hiding place. Banging on the door, Mary knew what they had planned for her. So to spare herself the agony of burning alive, she broke the mirror over the sink and used a shard to end her own life. But before she died, the bathroom door's lock gave way and the angry mob was met with a terrifying sight. Mary stood, blood gushing from the slit in her throat, staring into the remnants of the mirror. With her last breath, she vowed they'd remember her name. Fearing it was a curse, they burned her house down, leaving her body inside to disappear into the flames. The story ended up being passed down, morphing as it did so until it became a scary game to test one's courage. The steps are simple. You go into a dark bathroom alone at night. You stare into the mirror without blinking and you say her name 3 times. After the 3rd, you shut your eyes tight and are said to be able to hear Mary on the other side of the mirror. To win, you have to see her bloody corpse in place of your own reflection. But you must be quick and careful if you wish to make it out of the bathroom alive. You have to open your eyes before she is able to escape the mirror, but she doesn't like to be looked at, so it can only last a second. Then, you must switch on the lights while saying her name backwards 3 times with your eyes open. If you are unsuccessful, your loss will be greater than any game you've ever played before. Mary will come out of the mirror and grab you, taking you back with her, never to be seen again. At lunchtime, my friends were already making plans to play the games themselves. But the story gave me a sinking feeling in my stomach. Seeing as a girl just lost, I didn't feel like taking chances. Urban legend or not, I decided to sit this one out. Number 2, Boogeyman. I've been plagued with nightmares for as long as I can remember. While they are all different in some way, the premise always remains the same. I am being chased by this creature. It has human characteristics, but it's exaggerated. It stands on 2 legs, but it towers over me. It wears clothes, but the skin peeking out is almost monstrous in appearance. It has eyes, but the rest of its face is a blur of movement and shadows. I tried everything in my power to rid myself of this nightly monster, but to no avail. So I've learned to deal with it quietly on my own. Once I'm awake, he's gone until I lay my head back down. At least, that's what I thought. It wasn't until this past Thursday did I open myself up to someone other than my parents about my nightmares. As I described the creatures and what usually happens in my dream, the color on my roommate's face drained. Looking concerned, she asked me if I've ever researched the Boogeyman in the university library or online. I couldn't help but to let a laugh escape from my lips at that, but it was apparent by her continued serious gaze that she wasn't joking. She asked me what I knew about the Boogeyman, and I told her that every child has heard of the urban legend telling of a monster hiding under their bed or in their closet. She led me to a computer and quickly pulled up half a dozen websites covering personal encounters, descriptions, and the origin of this monster, all of which wrote as if it were as true of a being as I am. Ingesting as much information as possible that night, the doubt began to subside. Everything matched up to what I've experienced my whole life. According to several reports, the Boogeyman isn't just some creature that camps in the shadows. A book written in the 16th century detailed a creature that would appear to children and chase them throughout their life, but it wasn't random. It said he picked children deemed to be cursed when they were in their mother's womb. An accident made her nearly miscarry, but something intervened with fate and the baby lived instead. By defying the will of nature, death incarnate lurking around every corner to remind them that they can't cheat death forever. While some books said he would plague them only in their dreams, others spoke of something much more sinister. We found 3 personal accounts that detailed the progression of his appearance, from in their nightmares to seeing him in real life. 2 out of the 3 descended into madness, consumed by paranoia and fear of what he'd do when he caught them. Eventually, both died relatively young, one from a heart attack and the other an aneurysm. The third, his story was much shorter and more gruesome. He reportedly refused to live in fear, so he sought medical help for his night terrors. All was said to have been good for several months, until he didn't show up to class one day. An RA tried getting into his room, but ultimately had to call the cops when the spare key wasn't working. When they arrived, they discovered a scene fit for a horror movie. His blood painted the walls and his mangled body was found under the bed. Obviously, they ruled his death a homicide at first, but the security footage showed no one entering nor leaving his room around the time of the murder. And seeing as his room was located on the 4th floor, a window wasn't a plausible escape route for the killer. With no evidence found at the scene of another person's involvement besides the wounds being impossible to self-inflict, his case went cold. Feeling pressure from the college after receiving so much bad press, they deemed it a suicide to sweep it under the rug. The only reason it was ever linked to the Boogeyman was a single journal found in his desk drawer describing his night terrors began again the week of his death. After reading everything, we sat there in silence. A feeling of impending doom was almost palpable in the room. What am I to do? I didn't know if I should be angry or grateful for her showing me all this. That was 3 days ago. I haven't slept since, too terrified of what might happen if he knows that I know. I'm only writing this email to you, Professor, for in the case I don't show up to class on Monday, to come looking for me. Expect the worst, and know that I did not kill myself. I'm so incredibly tired, and I keep hearing a creaking noise coming from my closet. Number 1, the hook. Everyone has heard of this urban legend, or at least a very similar one. 2 lovers looking to get it hot and heavy take their car to a secluded location to get some privacy. Once there, they hear an announcement on the radio warning people of a possible serial killer on the loose. They ignore it, and during the hanky-panky, see a man with a hook for a hand standing outside their car. Angered, the boy tries to chase him off but gets gruesomely murdered instead. Some say the girl escaped, others say she also met an unfortunate demise. It's the classic slasher movie plot, but what I'm about to tell you isn't a movie script. it's true. I'll back up to the beginning to fill you in. My relationship with my father was never a particularly good one. He was always cold and distant. I moved out on my 18th birthday and only returned for a couple days over the holidays each year. So when I got the call he was in a car accident kept alive by a ventilator, I was in shock. The following days were a blur of paperwork and funeral planning, after which, as his only child and living relative, I was left his house. It was an old dusty thing filled to the brim with a lifetime of knickknacks and what appeared to be every newspaper ever printed. Seeing as I grew up here and was in a hurry to leave, I didn't feel like moving back. With the intention of putting it on the market, I began to clear out all the belongings. It was a pretty uneventful task until I reached his bedroom, a place I was always forbidden to enter for as long as I can remember. I wasn't even sure what color the walls were. It was an anticlimactic sight, for his room was almost barren, with only a bed and a single chest at its foot. Thinking or hoping it might contain some secret possession that would tell me more about my father, I eagerly opened it. It contained a few random articles of dated female clothing, which at first I assumed must have been my mother's, and a journal. The weird thing is, the only thing written inside were a series of numbers. 8151511. I thought it may be a phone number, but when I looked it up, I didn't find a match. Perplexed, I kept it in the back of my mind, gnawing at it for days while I finished the house. I still couldn't make sense of it until one day when I was in my living room watching an episode of Mr. Robot, in where he has to decipher a hidden message that uses numbers in place of letters. Deciding to give it a go, and after a few combinations, I finally got something. Hook. It left me even more confused than before. Why was this word so important that he had to go through this effort? Why was it worthy of an entire journal locked away for years? Taking to Google, it's not surprising I got nowhere with such a simple word. At some point, I decided just to try anything that popped in my mind that could go with Hook. Racking my brain, I looked to the clothes for clues. They were older than I thought, looking like they came from the late 50s, early 60s era. So I Googled Hook 1960, and sure enough, I got a match. And it wasn't what I was anticipating. Clicking on the first link took me to a newspaper archive from Missouri, a state one over from where we lived. It detailed a homicide of a teen found in a car at a popular makeout spot in June of 1960. There was another person attacked, a girl, but she lived and told investigators a story in which a man used a hook to kill her boyfriend. I went on to the next link that took me to another newspaper archive, but this time it was dated July 1961 and was from a small town in Ohio. The stories were nearly identical. I went through half a dozen more links. All different cases from different states, all detailed a man with a hook, all taking place in the summer. No suspects were ever found. Afterwards, I sat there dumbfounded, not knowing where to begin. The first thing that stood out to me were the clothes. They were all women's and came from the same time period. Were these theirs? I looked for pictures of the surviving women, but only found a single crime scene photo. It was a picture of the girl who appeared to be missing a bow from one of her braids. I recognized it immediately. It matched the one in the chest. I could feel a panic attack coming on. The room began to feel like it was closing in on me, but I couldn't stop searching for more clues. The next thing I noticed were the dates. They all took place in the summer months. My father was a high school teacher his entire life. He got the summers off. My fingers felt like they were moving at an inhuman speed. Before I knew what I was doing, I pulled up maps to visualize where all the murders took place. Going in chronological order with a couple of murders each summer for a total of 7 years, the color drained from my face. It made a circle, and in the middle, our state. Why would my father have a hidden message in his journal or the chest of women's clothes? Was it just a coincidence he had an identical hair bow to the one from the surviving victim? Wasn't it odd that none of the murders took place in our state, but we were in the middle of all of them? And what about the dates all happening when he was free from the obligation of work? The realization that followed made me break out in a cold sweat. Could my father have been the hook killer? I hope that creeped you out. If you dig the video, please give it a big thumbs up so I know that you liked it. And if you're new to this channel, I hope you click the notification button and you hit the subscribe button so that you join the rad family and are notified when a new creepy video goes up. Until next time, keep up the radness and I'll see you real soon. Bye.